I married a
The
man I
roads are
thought was
treacherous.
nobody.
Be safe.
A drifter
I
with
will.
calloused hands
The
and
message
holes
must
in his
get through.
boots.
Godspeed.
A veteran who slept in stables
I had
and
no
fixed
choice.
broken
You
fences
must
for
believe
meals.
me.
Believe you
Turned
after
out
everything?
he owned half
Yes,
of New
I
England.
did it for us.
But
How
let
can
me
I
tell
trust
you
that?
how a desperate girl and a runaway baron found each other in a frozen town square. How we both tried to escape the same prison. How the biggest lie either of us ever told became the truest thing in our lives. This is the story of how I destroyed my mother's plans and discovered something I never knew I was looking for. The morning Cecilia Hartwell decided to ruin her life, the sky over Boston was the color of old pewter. She stood in the hallway of Hartwell Manor, her mother's voice cutting through the walls like winter wind through a cracked window pane. Another suitor was coming, the fourth this month. Cece pressed her palms against the faded wallpaper, feeling the house settle around her. 18 months since her father's death. 18 months of watching everything they owned slip away like water through broken fingers. The paintings sold first, then the silver, then the horses one by one, until only the carriage horse remained. Now the house itself groaned under the weight of debts her father had left behind. Thomas Hartwell had been a dreamer, a man who believed in railroad futures and shipping ventures and investments that always seemed to promise everything and deliver nothing. He died, leaving his daughter a crumbling mansion and a mother with a solution as simple as it was suffocating. Marry money, marry it fast, marry it before the creditors came knocking and the neighbors started counting the days until foreclosure. The drawing room door opened. Victoria Hartwell emerged 50 years old and sharp as January frost. "He'll be here at 3, she said. Not a greeting, a pronouncement. "Arthur Pemberton, I expect you in the blue dress, the one with the lace collar." Cece said nothing. She was learned silence was safer than disagreement. "Did you hear me, Cecilia?" "Yes, mother." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She moved closer, close enough that Cece could smell the lavender water she dabbed at her wrists, close enough to study her daughter's face for signs of rebellion. "This one is different," Victoria said. Her voice dropped, took on a tone that might have been mistaken for kindness in another woman. "Arthur Pemberton owns half the textile mills in Massachusetts. He's educated, refined, a widower, yes, but that means he knows how to be a proper husband." The words hung between them. "He's already buried 2 wives. That's what her mother wasn't saying. That's what made him perfect. A man who knew the business of marriage, who understood that women were investments carefully managed and occasionally replaced when they stopped yielding returns." Cece's stomach turned. "I'll be ready at 3, she said. Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you will, darling. You're a Hartwell. We know our duty." She swept past, leaving behind the scent of lavender and the weight of expectations Cece had been carrying since she could walk in heeled shoes and curtsy without wobbling. Cece stood alone in the hallway. The grandfather clock ticked. The house creaked. Outside, February wind rattled the windows, trying to get in or trying to get out. She couldn't tell which. She climbed the stairs to her father's study, the room her mother never entered anymore. Too many memories of failure, perhaps. Too many reminders of the man who had loved his daughter more than he loved success. The study still smelled like him, pipe tobacco and old books and the faint cedar scent of the desk where he used to let her sit while he worked, where he taught her to read ledgers and calculate interest and understand that numbers told stories just as surely as words did. "You have my mind, Cece," he used to say. "Don't let anyone tell you that's worth less than a pretty face." But pretty faces were all anyone wanted to see. Pretty faces in blue dresses with lace collars smiling politely, while men who could be their fathers asked their mothers if they were good with children, if they had manageable temperaments, if their bloodlines were sound. Cece opened the desk drawer, found the ledgers her mother thought she didn't know about, the truth written in careful columns of red ink. 6 months, maybe 8 if they were careful, if they dismissed the remaining staff, if they stopped heating the upper floors, if they ate less and hoped more and prayed the roof didn't cave in before Victoria could marry her daughter off to anyone with enough money to save them. Arthur Pemberton, 58 years old, a tobacco-stained smile and soft hands that had never done real work. A man who looked at her the way her father used to look at his prize hunting dogs. Evaluating, calculating value, checking teeth. Cece closed the ledger, sat in her father's chair, let the weight of 18 months press down on her shoulders until she thought she might crack under it. And then, like a crack of lightning through clouds, an idea. Terrible, reckless, possibly insane. What if she married someone completely unsuitable? Someone so far beneath her station that her mother would have no choice but to disown her entirely. She would lose the house, yes. The Hartwell name, certainly. But she would gain something her mother's plans would never allow. Freedom. The thought took root, grew branches, became a forest in her mind. She would need to find someone quickly. Someone poor enough to appall her mother into washing her hands of her daughter forever. A tradesman, perhaps. A factory worker. Someone kind enough not to harm her, but desperate enough to agree. Someone disconnected from Boston society. Someone her mother would never think to control. Cece spent 2 sleepless nights working out the details, pacing her bedroom until the floorboards creaked, until the plan became solid enough to hold, until she couldn't not do it. On the 3rd night, unable to sleep, she crept downstairs for water. Voices stopped her in the hallway. Her mother's study, light beneath the door. Past midnight. Victoria never stayed up this late. Cece moved closer, pressed her ear to the wood. Assured me the information is accurate. Her mother's voice. Nathaniel Blackwood has been hiding in Millbrook for 5 years. The investigator confirmed it. A man's voice responded. Unfamiliar. Oily. And you're certain your daughter will go there? I'll make certain. I've already begun restricting her options, making Boston unbearable. When I present Arthur Pemberton tomorrow, she'll run. She's predictable that way. Thinks she's rebelling when really she's following the path I've laid. And if she doesn't find Blackwood, she will. Millbrook is 3 miles away, small enough that a stranger will be noticed. A baron hiding as a veteran, she'll stumble right into him. The girl has a savior complex, always has. And then we wait. Let her marry him thinking he's poor. Let the marriage become public. Baron Blackwood's reputation will be destroyed. A hasty secret marriage to a desperate woman, Marcus can use that in court. Proof of instability. Proof of unfitness. The other voice laughed. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, Mrs. Hartwell. I don't leave things to chance, Mr. Chen. My daughter thinks she's clever, but I've been playing this game since before she was born. Footsteps approached the door. Cece fled, ran silently back up the stairs, heart pounding, mind racing. Her mother knew she would run, knew where she would go, was counting on it. But why? What was this game? Who was Nathaniel Blackwood? And why did Victoria want Cece to marry him? Cece lay awake the rest of the night, thinking, planning. By dawn, she'd made a decision. She would run anyway, would follow her mother's predicted path, but she would do it with eyes open, would watch for traps, would turn Victoria's plan against her somehow. Because the one thing her mother hadn't counted on was this: Cece had been listening. Cece knew the game now, and she would play to win. On a frozen Thursday morning before sunrise, she wrapped herself in her plainest cloak, packed a small bag with the last pieces of her mother's jewelry she could sell, pulled on walking boots that had never been meant for real roads. She left no note. Notes could be intercepted. Notes could be used to find her. The only person who saw her leave was Mrs. Brennan the cook, the last remaining servant who remembered when Hartwell Manor had been something worth working for, who remembered Thomas Hartwell teaching his daughter arithmetic in the kitchen while bread rose. Mrs. Brennan pressed a cloth-wrapped package into Cece's hands. Bread, cheese, an apple. Your father would be proud, she said. Nothing more. Cece walked into the February darkness. 3 miles to Millbrook, 3 miles to the edge of her old life. 3 miles to either freedom or disaster, and she no longer cared which. Behind her in an upper window, Victoria Hartwell watched her daughter disappear down the frost-covered road and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The walk took longer than Cece expected. Her boots made for drawing rooms and garden paths weren't built for frozen mud and winter roads. By the time she reached Millbrook, the sun had climbed halfway up the sky, and her feet felt like blocks of ice wrapped in leather. Millbrook was everything Boston society wasn't. Small, working, honest in a way that made her mother's world look like stage scenery. Men in canvas coats loaded wagons. Women carried baskets to the general store. Smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the smell of morning fires and cooking meat. Cece stood at the edge of the town square, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her cloak might be plain by Hartwell standards, but here it marked her as other. Her posture, trained through years of deportment lessons, gave her away. She tried to slouch, to look ordinary, to become invisible. It didn't work. She was a lighthouse in a harbor. Impossible to miss. A farmer loading hay bales glanced at her, then away, then back. Curious, but cautious. Millbrook was a town where strangers were noticed, where everyone knew everyone and newcomers were either trouble or opportunity. Cece felt her resolve waver. The absurdity of her plan hit her like cold water. What was she supposed to do? Walk up to the nearest working man and propose marriage? But then she remembered her mother's voice. She'll stumble right into him. This wasn't chance. This was manipulation. Victoria had set this stage, had researched this Nathaniel Blackwood, had predicted Cece would come here. So be it. Cece would play the part, but she would remember it was a part, would watch for the trap. The sound of hooves on frozen cobblestone pulled her from her thoughts. A man rode into the square on a mud-splattered horse. His posture was military straight, despite the obvious exhaustion in his shoulders. He wore a faded coat that might have been a uniform once, dark fabric patched in places worn thin at the elbows. His face was shadowed by several days of beard growth, and when he dismounted, he moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had learned not to trust solid ground. Cece found herself staring. He was younger than she expected, late 20s perhaps, early 30s at most. His face had the kind of weathered quality that came from sleeping outdoors and eating irregularly. There was a scar along his jawline, pale and thin. But his hands, as he tied the horse's reins to the post outside Murphy's Inn, were steady, calloused, strong. He moved like a man who had seen things he would never speak about, who carried ghosts in his shoulders and nightmares in the careful way he never quite turned his back to open spaces. A veteran. The war had been over 6 years, but men like this were still coming home, still trying to figure out how to live in a world that hadn't stopped turning while they were gone. Nathaniel Blackwood, Cece thought. It has to be. Her mother had said he was hiding here, a Baron-playing veteran. This man fit every piece of the puzzle, which meant this was the trap. The moment Victoria had orchestrated, Cece took a breath, made her choice. She would spring the trap deliberately, would marry this man whoever he was, would turn her mother's manipulation into her own weapon somehow. Their eyes met across the square. His were the color of a winter sea, gray-blue, storm-touched. They studied her with the kind of careful attention men learned in trenches, taking in her fine wool cloak, the way her posture betrayed years of lessons in how to stand, how to sit, how to be decorative. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Cecilia Hartwell did something she would never be able to fully explain. Not to herself, not to anyone. She stepped forward. Her heart hammered so hard she thought he might hear it, and she spoke. "Excuse me, are you married?" The man blinked, clearly startled. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face like carvings in old wood, the way his jaw tightened as if bracing for an attack. He looked at her like she might be a hallucination brought on by too many nights sleeping on frozen ground. "I beg your pardon." His voice was rough, gravel underfoot, but the accent was educated, she realized. Hidden under layers of disuse, but there. Like a gentleman's voice left outside in the rain. Cece's hands shook inside her cloak, but her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I need to know if you're married. It's important." The man stared at her for a beat too long. His expression caught between confusion and suspicion. One hand still rested on his horse's neck. The other hung at his side, relaxed but ready. A soldier's stance. Always prepared. Then slowly he shook his head. "No, I'm not." Cece took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "Good," she said, "because I have a proposition for you." The man didn't laugh. She took that as a small miracle. He stood there in the frozen square, studying her with the kind of careful attention that made her feel like he could see through skin to bone. His eyes moved from her face to her cloak, taking in details. Calculating. "A proposition," he repeated, not a question. The sound of a man who had heard too many propositions in his life. None of them good. Heat rose to Cece's cheeks despite the cold. "I need to marry someone," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Quickly. Someone who won't ask questions or expect anything beyond a legal arrangement. In return, I can offer you a modest sum. Not much, but enough to start over somewhere, if that's what you need." The soldier's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He glanced past her, scanning the square, as if checking for witnesses. Or perhaps looking for whoever had put her up to this cruel joke. When he looked back at her, there was something harder in his face. "You're serious." "Completely. You're running from something." It wasn't a question, but Cece answered anyway. "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. In that silence, Cece became aware of how loud her own heartbeat sounded in her ears. A cart rattled past behind them. Somewhere a dog barked. The ordinary sounds of a village morning, while she stood in the middle of it, asking a complete stranger to upend both their lives. For my mother's reasons, she reminded herself, this is her trap, but I'm walking in deliberately. "What's your name?" he asked finally. Cece hesitated. Giving him her real name meant risk, but lying seemed pointless now. Victoria clearly wanted this marriage to happen. Cecilia Hartwell. She watched his face carefully for recognition, for the change that always came when people heard the Hartwell name. But there was nothing. Either he didn't know the family or he didn't care. Both possibilities felt like relief. Nathaniel, he said, Nathaniel Mackenzie, and I think you should go home, Miss Hartwell. Whatever you're running from marriage to a soldier with nothing but a tired horse and borrowed time isn't going to solve it. Mackenzie Cece noted, not Blackwood, so he was using a false name. Hiding. The rejection stung more than she expected. She had prepared herself for suspicion, even mockery, but not for gentle dismissal, not for someone to look at her desperate plan and try to protect her from it. You don't understand, she said, and hated how her voice wavered. Going home isn't an option. My mother is determined to sell me to the highest bidder, and I won't do it. I won't spend my life as some old man's decorative investment. If I marry you, marry anyone she considers unsuitable, she'll wash her hands of me entirely. I'll be disowned, but I'll be free. Except she won't, Cece thought, because this is exactly what she wants. But maybe I can figure out why. Maybe I can turn it around. Nathaniel shifted his weight. She saw him wince slightly, some old injury making itself known. An ankle, perhaps, or a knee that had learned to predict weather changes. And what happens to you after that, he asked. When you're disowned and married to a man with no prospects, have you thought about what freedom costs when you can't afford bread? I've thought about it every night for 2 weeks, Cece said. The honesty of it rang in the cold air between them. I know what I'm asking. I know how it sounds. But I also know that if I don't do something now, I'll wake up one morning 20 years from now in a house I hate, married to a man I despise, wondering when exactly I stopped being a person and became a thing to be managed. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. Cece found herself unable to look away. There was something ancient in his eyes, the kind of weariness that had nothing to do with age. She wondered what he had seen in the war, what he had done, what he was trying to forget. I can't give you the life you're used to, he said quietly. I have a small cottage on the edge of nowhere. No servants, no society, barely enough to keep the roof from leaking. That's not freedom, Miss Hartwell. That's just a different kind of prison. It's my choice of prison, Cece said. That's the difference, Baha. Something flickered across Nathaniel's face. Recognition, maybe. Respect. He looked down at his hands, at the calluses and scars that marked years of hard living, and Cece saw him weighing something she couldn't name. Why me, he asked. There are other men in this village, men who might jump at the chance to marry a Hartwell, even a disgraced one. Cece had asked herself the same question in the 30 seconds since she'd first seen him. The truth was complicated, instinctual, and tactical. Because you look like someone who understands what it means to want out, she said simply. And because I think you're hiding too. We're both running. Maybe we can help each other. Nathaniel met her eyes, and for the first time something almost like a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was gone before Cece could be sure she'd seen it, but it left behind a warmth she felt in her frozen fingers. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it properly. Legal documents, witnesses, a real marriage in the eyes of the law, even if it's an empty one. I won't have you trapped in some arrangement you can't escape if things go wrong. Cece felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized had been clenched tight since her father died. Agreed. Nathaniel held out his hand, rough and scarred and steady. Cece took it. His grip was warm despite the cold. Then I suppose we're getting married, Lady Cecilia. She smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. Just Cece, she said. I'm about to lose the title anyway. Or gain a bigger one, she thought, if you really are Baron Blackwood. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur of practical arrangements and careful distance. Nathaniel found her a room at Murphy's Inn. Rose O'Malley, the proprietor, was a woman of 40 with knowing eyes and a soft heart, hidden under layers of practicality. She asked no questions when Nathaniel paid for Cece's lodging, just showed her to a clean room on the second floor and brought her hot water for washing. You need anything, love, you knock, Rose said, then quieter. And if you need help getting away from something, you knock twice. Cece almost cried at the kindness of it. Nathaniel insisted on sleeping in the stable with his horse. Propriety, he said. Even in a marriage of convenience, there were appearances to maintain. Cece didn't argue. Part of her was relieved. Part of her was disappointed in a way she couldn't name. They met for meals at the inn, awkward conversations over soup and bread, careful politeness. Neither prying too deep into the other's past. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But Cece noticed things. The way Nathaniel cut his bread. Precise. almost geometric, military precision, the way he never sat with his back to the door, always positioned to see entrances, exits, threats, the nightmares that woke him in the stable. Rose mentioned them once quietly, said she heard him sometimes crying out in sleep, words she couldn't make out, sounds no one should have to make. And Cece noticed other things, small things that didn't fit the image of a drifting veteran. His hands, yes, were calloused, but the calluses were wrong, not the rough, uneven marks of manual labor. More like the calluses of someone who had once done fine work, precision work, the way he spoke when he forgot to hide it. Educated, well-read. He quoted something once at dinner on the second night, a line from a book she recognized. Philosophy, John Stuart Mill. The only freedom which deserves the name is that of pursuing our own good in our own way. He said it absently, then caught himself, went quiet, changed the subject. Cece filed it away. Another piece of a puzzle she was starting to assemble. On the third day, they went to the town clerk, a nervous man named Henderson, who asked if they were certain if they'd thought this through, if they understood this was a legal binding contract. "We understand," Nathaniel said. His voice had that quiet authority that made Henderson stop asking questions. They signed papers, gave their names, listed their occupations. Cece put none. Nathaniel put laborer. Liar, Cece thought. Baron Nathaniel Blackwood. I know who you are. But she said nothing. Signed her name. Made it official. Henderson witnessed. Made it legal. Handed them a marriage certificate with their names written in careful script. Nathaniel folded it, put it in his coat pocket, looked at Cece. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll do this properly." That night, Cece wrote a letter to Victoria, to the mother who had orchestrated this entire situation. "Mother, by the time you read this, I will be married. I have chosen my own life. Do not look for me." See, she sealed it, gave it to Rose to post after the ceremony, then lay awake in her room listening to the sounds of Millbrook settling into sleep, wondering what game her mother was really playing, wondering how Nathaniel Blackwood fit into it, wondering if she was brave or just terrified, wondering if there was a difference. The wedding took place in a stone church so small it could barely hold a dozen people. Father Donnelly, an elderly priest with kind eyes and trembling hands, performed the ceremony. He asked no questions about banns or courtship periods, just spoke the words that would bind them together. Cece wore a simple dress of deep blue wool, borrowed from Rose, who was close enough to her size. It smelled like lavender and wood smoke, like someone else's life. Nathaniel stood beside her in his cleaned uniform, the patches less noticeable in the dim light filtering through stained glass windows. He had shaved, cut his hair, looked like someone trying to be presentable for a thing that mattered. The church was nearly empty. Rose Murphy and her husband, the stable boy from the inn, Father Donnelly and his housekeeper. 6 people to witness the destruction of Cecilia Hartwell's old life and the creation of something new. Something she didn't understand yet. Something that felt like walking into a trap with eyes wide open. Father Donnelly spoke the traditional words about love and honor and cleaving to one another, about what God had joined together. The words felt heavy, more real than Cece had expected. When Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger, a plain silver band he'd purchased from the village blacksmith, Cece noticed his hands weren't shaking at all. Hers were. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father Donnelly said. He smiled, genuinely pleased, as if he believed this was a love match, as if he couldn't see the desperation underneath the vows. "You may kiss your bride." Nathaniel looked at her, a question in his eyes, permission asked and granted in a glance. He kissed her, chaste, brief, his lips barely brushing hers, but his hand on her arm was warm, steady, real. They walked out of the church into afternoon sunlight that felt impossibly bright. Cece thought of Victoria reading her letter, the teacup shattering against the floor, the shrieking that would rattle the windows of Hartwell Manor. Except Victoria wouldn't be shrieking. Victoria would be smiling, because this was exactly what she wanted. But why they climbed into Nathaniel's wagon, the one he'd borrowed from a farmer who owed him a favor. The horse, no longer mud-splattered, pulled them away from Millbrook, away from the church, toward a cottage Cece had never seen, toward a life she couldn't imagine. As they rode, Cece noticed something she'd missed before. The saddle Nathaniel used on his horse. Worn, yes, patched in places, but expensive ones, quality leather. And there, barely visible under layers of oil and dirt, were initials burned into the leather. NB, AV, not NM for Nathaniel Mackenzie. Nathaniel Blackwood, Ashland Valley. Cece looked at her new husband. at the careful way he held the reins, at the military posture he couldn't quite hide, at the educated voice that slipped through when he wasn't guarding it. She knew who he was, had known since her mother's conversation, had walked into this marriage knowing it was a trap. But Nathaniel didn't know she knew, didn't know Victoria had orchestrated this, didn't know they were both being played. The question was, what did Cece do with that knowledge? She looked down at the silver ring on her finger, felt the weight of it, the reality of what she'd just done. She'd married a man she barely knew, a man hiding from his title, a man her mother wanted her to marry for reasons Cece didn't understand, and she'd done it deliberately, eyes open, walking into the trap. Now she just had to figure out how to spring it, how to turn her mother's manipulation against her, how to survive what came next. The cottage appeared on the hillside, small, isolated, a hiding place. Nathaniel helped her down from the wagon, their first moment alone as husband and wife. "Welcome home," he said, and Cece wondered whose home it really was, whose life she'd just entered, whose secrets she'd just married. Nathaniel's cottage sat on a hillside 5 miles from Millbrook, overlooking a valley that stretched toward mountains, still capped with snow. The structure was small, one room essentially. Stone walls, a peaked roof that looked like it had been patched more than once, a single window facing east to catch morning light. It was the kind of place a man chose when he wanted to disappear. Cece climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the ride. The wind up here was different from Boston, sharper, cleaner. It carried the smell of pine and cold earth and something wild she couldn't name. "It's not much," Nathaniel said. He didn't look at her when he said it, just began unhitching the horse with movements that were practiced and efficient. Cece studied the cottage, the carefully stacked firewood under an overhang, the small garden plot dormant now but outlined with stones that had been placed with geometric precision, the bucket positioned in one corner of the interior visible through the open door. "You said there was a leak," she said, "northeast corner, when it rains hard." "We'll fix it." He glanced at her then, surprised maybe, or assessing whether she understood what "we" would mean here. No servants to call, no staff to manage problems, while she attended to more important things. Just two people and whatever they could build with their own hands. Inside, the cottage was exactly as austere as she'd expected. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a wooden table with two mismatched chairs, a bed frame with a thin mattress, shelves that held cooking implements and a few chipped plates. Everything clean but worn, everything functional. And then the things that didn't fit. Books, not many but more than a laborer should own. Philosophy, history, a volume of poetry so old the spine had cracked. They sat on a shelf near the bed arranged with the same precision as the garden stones outside. A violin case leaned in the corner. Dust-covered but expensive. The kind of instrument that cost more than most men in Millbrook earned in a year. And the way everything was organized. Military neat, corners squared, tools hung at exact intervals. Even the firewood was stacked with mathematical precision. Cece cataloged it all. More evidence, more confirmation. Nathaniel saw her looking. "The bed is yours," he said. "I'll make a pallet by the fire." "You don't have to." "We agreed, a legal marriage but not that kind. You keep the bed, I'll manage fine." There was no arguing with that tone. Cece recognized it from her father, the voice of a man who had made a decision and considered the matter closed. She set her small bag on the bed, looked around at what would be her home now. This single room with its leaking roof and borrowed furniture and secrets hiding in plain sight. "Thank you," she said, "for agreeing to this, for not asking too many questions." Nathaniel was building a fire in the hearth. He didn't turn around. "We all have things we're running from, Miss Hartwell. I'm not in a position to judge." "Cece," she said, "you called me that once, at the church." He paused, then nodded. "Cece, then." The fire caught. Light spilled across the room, turning stone walls golden. Outside, the sun was setting over the valley, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. Their first night as husband and wife, and they were strangers, polite and careful and dancing around all the things they weren't saying. "He's Baron Blackwood," Cece thought, hiding from his title, "and my mother wants me married to him for some reason." But what reason? What's the end game? She wondered how long she could keep her knowledge secret, how long before she'd have to show her hand. She wondered what game they were both really playing. The first week passed in a rhythm that was strange and quiet and occasionally uncomfortable. Nathaniel woke before dawn. Always. Cece learned to recognize the sound of him moving through the cottage in the dark, the careful way he added wood to the fire, The silence as he stood by the window watching the sun come up. Some morning ritual she didn't understand. Some ghost he was greeting or trying to forget. He made coffee, strong and bitter. Offered her a cup without speaking. They drank in companionable silence, watching light spill into the valley. Then work. Always work. Nathaniel had projects everywhere. The roof needed patches. The garden plot needed turning for spring planting. Firewood needed cutting and stacking. He moved through tasks with methodical focus, never rushing, never stopping. Cece tried to help, tried to be useful. The first morning she attempted to cook breakfast, burned the porridge so badly it stuck to the pot like tar. Nathaniel looked at the mess, then at her. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "You've never cooked before, have you? The staff always—" She stopped, realized how that sounded. "No, I haven't." He didn't mock her, just showed her the basics: how to judge heat, how to stir, how to taste and adjust. His hands, rough and scarred, moved with surprising gentleness, a teacher's patience. By the third day, she could make bread that didn't taste like charcoal. By the fifth day, she could cook a stew that was actually edible. Small victories, but they felt enormous. They talked, but carefully. Surface things, the weather, the work that needed doing, books they'd read. He asked about her father once, what he'd been like. "A dreamer," Cece said. "He believed in things that didn't believe back. Investments that failed, futures that never came. But he was kind. He taught me to think even when everyone said women shouldn't bother." Nathaniel nodded. "Sounds like a good man, the kind who gets eaten alive by the world." He was, and he did. They didn't talk about the war. When Cece tried once, Nathaniel's face went carefully blank, a wall coming down, so she stopped asking. But she heard him at night, the nightmares that woke him gasping, words she couldn't make out, sounds of pain and fear, and things no one should have to remember. He never mentioned them in the morning, never acknowledged that she could hear him thrashing on his pallet by the fire. She pretended she couldn't. It seemed kinder. During the day, she watched him work, noticed things, the way he held tools, precise, almost delicate. These weren't the hands of a common laborer. They were educated hands, trained for fine work. The way he fixed things. The roof leak required calculations, angles, and measurements. He worked them out on a scrap of paper with handwriting that was elegant, practiced. The handwriting of someone who had been taught by tutors, not schoolmasters. And the violin. On the sixth night, when he thought she was asleep, she heard music, soft and achingly beautiful. He played in the dark by the fire's dying light. Played like someone who had studied, who had been taught by masters. The music stopped when she stirred, pretending to wake. When she opened her eyes, the violin was back in its case. Nathaniel was lying on his pallet, face turned away. Neither of them mentioned it, but Cece couldn't stop thinking, couldn't stop noticing. The contradictions piling up like stones, building into a wall she would eventually have to climb. She knew who he was, Baron Nathaniel Blackwood. Her mother had said so. But why did Victoria want them married? What was the trap? What was the end game? On the eighth morning, while Nathaniel was outside chopping wood, Cece decided to find out. She'd been cleaning, trying to be useful, when she knocked over a stack of papers near the bed. They scattered across the floor, and there, among receipts for nails and flour, was an envelope. The address was partially visible under a water stain. Baron Nathaniel Blackwood, Ashland Valley Estate, Vermont. Cece's heart hammered. She looked at the door, heard the steady rhythm of the axe outside, splitting wood. Shah-di-di-dun. She had maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. She searched, hands shaking, found more. A photograph. Nathaniel in formal attire, morning coat, cravat, standing in front of a mansion that made Hartwell Manor look like a cottage. His hair shorter, his face clean-shaven, but unmistakably him. Deed papers, property holdings. Ashland Valley Estate, 1,500 acres. Blackwood Steelworks, railway shares. A fortune written in legal documents and property lines. And a letter, recent, the seal broken. "Nathaniel, we need you. The estate is in crisis. Daniel says we have weeks, maybe months. Marcus is making his move. You must come back. Please. Eleanor Blackwood." Marcus. Cece's mind raced. Could it be the same Marcus her mother had mentioned, Marcus Blackwood? She heard the axe stop outside. Footsteps approaching. Cece quickly scattered the papers back where they'd fallen. Sat on the floor like she was still gathering them, heart pounding. The door opened. Nathaniel stood in the threshold, axe in hand. Saw her on the floor, saw the papers spread around her, saw his secrets laid bare in afternoon light. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he set the axe down, closed the door, sat on the bed across from her, looked at the photograph in her hands. I suppose we need to talk, he said. Cece's hands were shaking. She couldn't stop them. Couldn't stop the questions flooding her mind. Play dumb, she thought. Don't let him know you already knew. Don't show your hand yet. Who are you? Her voice came out harder than she intended. Really? Nathaniel was quiet. His face had gone carefully neutral. That same blank expression he wore when she asked about the war, a mask slipping into place. My full name is Nathaniel Alexander Blackwood, he said finally, Baron of Ashland Valley. I inherited the title when I was 19. My father died, left me everything. Estates, holdings, a steel empire, and expectations I couldn't breathe under. Cece stared at him, pretending shock. You lied. I omitted. You let me think you were poor, desperate, a veteran with nothing. I am a veteran with nothing, Nathaniel said. His voice was quiet but not apologetic. The title doesn't belong to me anymore. I haven't been Baron Blackwood for 5 years. I've been Nathaniel Mackenzie, enlisted man, nobody. That's not how titles work. You don't just stop being. I fled to the war, he interrupted, used a false name, tried to become someone else, someone real. The war ended and I couldn't go back, couldn't walk back into that life. So I didn't. I've been hiding here ever since, living small, trying to forget what I was supposed to be. Cece looked down at the photograph, at the young man in expensive clothes standing in front of a mansion, at the life Nathaniel had run from. Why marry me? She asked. Why agree to my insane plan if you're a baron hiding from his responsibilities? Nathaniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Because you needed someone unsuitable, he said, and I needed someone who wanted me for the wrong reasons. Someone who wouldn't care about the title or the money or any of it. Someone who just wanted an escape route and didn't ask too many questions. That's twisted. Yes. We're both liars then. I suppose we are. Cece wanted to tell him, wanted to say I already knew. My mother told me. This is all a trap. But something stopped her. Some instinct that said not yet. Wait, watch, learn more. Instead, she let herself laugh, started small. Then it grew, built in her chest until she couldn't stop it. Until tears streamed down her face and she was gasping for breath. Nathaniel stared at her like she'd lost her mind. We're idiots, she gasped. Complete idiots, both of us. And then he laughed too, a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. Absolute fools, he agreed. They sat there laughing like children, like people who had finally understood the punchline of a joke that had been following them for years. When the laughter died, Cece wiped her eyes, looked at him seriously. Tell me the rest, she said. All of it. So he did. He told her about inheriting the title at 19, about the weight of it, the expectations, the responsibility for hundreds of workers, thousands of acres, a social position he'd never wanted and didn't know how to fill, about his mother who had died when he was young, his father who had been cold and exacting and impossible to please, about growing up in a mansion that felt like a mausoleum, about learning that money and power were just other words for loneliness, about fleeing to the war, enlisting under a false name, finding something real in the trenches, something honest, men who didn't care about titles, who cared about whether you could keep watch or dig a trench or share your rations when food was scarce, about the things he'd seen, the things he'd done. He didn't go into detail, but she heard it in the spaces between words. The ghosts he carried, about coming home after the armistice, standing at the gates of Ashland Valley Estate, turning around, walking away, choosing poverty and peace over wealth and suffocation. I've been hiding for 5 years, he said, living in this cottage on land I technically own, hoping no one would find me, hoping I could just be Nathaniel Mackenzie until I died. Why agree to marry me then? Cece asked. If you wanted to stay hidden, why risk bringing someone into your life? Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. I saw you in that square, desperate, brave, trying so hard to escape something. And I recognized it. That look. I've seen it in my own mirror for years. We're the same Cece, both running, both trying to choose our own cages. I thought maybe we could run together. Maybe it would be less lonely. Cece felt something crack open in her chest, guilt, because she knew things he didn't, knew about Victoria's manipulation, about the trap closing around them both. She should tell him, should warn him, but not yet, not until she understood more. I'm still angry you didn't tell me, she said. I know. But I understand why you didn't. Thank you. What do we do now? Nathaniel looked at the papers scattered on the floor, at the evidence of his abandoned life. We stay here, he said. We stay Nate and Cece, two people who chose each other for the wrong reasons. And maybe if we're lucky, we figure out how to make this real. Cece studied him. This man who was a baron and a soldier and a liar, and maybe possibly her only real ally, in a game she didn't fully understand. I'd like that, she said. Nathaniel smiled, small but genuine. So would I. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the cottage, two people who had run from everything they were supposed to be sat together in the growing dark, surrounded by secrets finally spoken, and secrets still hidden, because Cece hadn't told him about Victoria, about the conspiracy, about the fact that their marriage was orchestrated. Not yet. She would, soon, when she understood more, when she figured out how to keep them both alive in the trap her mother had set. Neither of them heard the horse approaching until it was too late, until hoofbeats were already in the yard, until someone was pounding on the door. A voice outside, educated, urgent, angry. Nathaniel Blackwood, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. Nathaniel's face went pale, then hard. Daniel, he said, my estate manager. He stood, opened the door. The man on the other side was tall, lean, 35 maybe, dressed in riding clothes that were expensive but travel-stained. His face was sharp, intelligent, and furious. 5 years, Daniel said. His voice shook. 5 years I've been searching. 5 years while the estate falls apart. 5 years while Marcus makes his play and Eleanor writes letters you never answer. 5 goddamn years, Nathaniel. He pushed past Nathaniel into the cottage, saw Cece sitting on the floor surrounded by papers, saw the wedding ring on her finger. His eyes widened. What the hell is this? Daniel Sullivan paced the cottage like a caged animal. 3 steps. Turn. 3 steps back. His boots left mud on the floor Cece had cleaned that morning. You got married, he said, not a question. An accusation. You've been hiding in the woods for 5 years, ignoring every letter, every plea for help, and you got married. Nathaniel stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, face unreadable. This is Cecilia, he said, my wife. Daniel finally looked at her. Really looked. Took in her fine features. Her hands soft despite a week of work. Her posture. Let me guess, he said. Boston money, old family, running from something. Cece lifted her chin, refused to be intimidated. Yes. And he told you he was a drifter, a nobody, played the tragic veteran card. Nathaniel's voice held a warning. Did he mention he's one of the wealthiest men in New England? Did he mention the 1,500 people whose livelihoods depend on him? Did he mention his sister Eleanor, who's been managing the estate alone while he plays at poverty? Cece stood, faced Daniel directly. He told me tonight, just now, before you arrived. Daniel laughed, sharp and bitter. Convenient timing. Daniel, Nathaniel moved between them. That's enough. You want to be angry at me? Fine. But leave her out of it. Something passed between the two men. Some history Cece couldn't read. Daniel's jaw worked. He looked away first. The estate is in crisis, he said finally. His voice was calmer now, but no less urgent. Marcus has been building his case for 3 years, claiming you abandoned your duties, claiming the title should pass to him as the next male heir. He's got lawyers, evidence, testimony from workers you haven't seen in 5 years. Marcus always wanted the title, Nathaniel said. He can have it. It's not that simple. Daniel pulled papers from his coat, unfolded them on the table. There's a hearing in 10 days. Legal challenge. If you don't appear, if you don't fight, this Marcus wins by default. The estate, the steel works, everything. I don't care about the steel works. The workers care. Nathaniel 1,500 families care Marcus will gut the operation, sell it off piece by piece. People will lose their livelihoods, their homes. Eleanor will lose everything your father built. Nathaniel's face was stone, but Cece saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, responsibility. The chains he'd been trying to break still wrapped around his ankles. She made a decision. We'll go, she said. Both men turned to her. What? Nathaniel's voice was flat. We'll go to the estate, face this Marcus, fight the challenge. Cece stepped forward. Those people depend on you. We can't ignore that. Cece, you don't understand. I understand that running doesn't actually solve anything. I understand that we both tried to escape, but escape isn't the same as freedom. Real freedom means facing what you ran from and choosing differently. And I need to understand what my mother's planning, she thought. This Marcus, the conspiracy. It's all connected. Going to the estate will show me the full picture. Nathaniel stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Surprise, maybe respect. You're suggesting we go back to the thing you just found out I lied about. I'm suggesting we face it together. Daniel looked between them, reassessing, calculating. Who are you really, T? He asked Cece. Because you're not just some desperate socialite. Cece met his eyes. I'm Cecilia Hartwell. My father taught me business. My mother taught me to survive. And I just married a baron who was pretending to be a drifter. So yes, I'm angry, and yes, I'm confused. But I'm also practical. If we're going to be married, we might as well face our demons together. A ghost of a smile touched Daniel's face. I like her, he said to Nathaniel. She's got spine. Nathaniel was still looking at Cece, some silent conversation happening in the space between them. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. The moment I show up at Ashland Valley as Baron Blackwood, this life is over. The cottage, the quiet, the hiding. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Cece said. Maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to spring my mother's trap, she thought, and turn it against her. Says the woman who ran from her mother. Exactly, I know what running costs, and I'm tired of paying it. Nathaniel took a long breath, let it out, looked at Daniel. 10 days. 10 days. We leave tomorrow. You need to be seen at the estate. Need to show the court you're engaged, capable, ready to take responsibility. I'm not ready. Then fake it. You're a baron. You've been faking things your whole life. Cece saw Nathaniel flinch at that. But he nodded. Fine, we'll go. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Relief, victory. Pack light. We ride at dawn. He left, walked out into the night. They heard his horse departing, the sound fading into darkness. Nathaniel and Cece stood in the cottage, their sanctuary, their hiding place, the life they'd built in a week about to end. I'm sorry, Nathaniel said. I brought you into this mess. I walked into it willingly, Cece said, eyes open. More open than you know, she thought. What made you decide to go with me? Cece thought about Victoria, about the conspiracy she'd overheard, about needing to understand the full picture before she could act. Because I spent my whole life watching people run from problems, she said. My mother ran from honesty. My father ran from reality. I ran from my mother. You ran from responsibility. And all it ever does is create bigger problems later. Maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting. Nathaniel looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you, Baron Blackwood. Call me Nate. Call me Cece. They stood in the firelight, two people who had married as strangers, who had spent a week learning to live together, who had discovered each other's vice and somehow decided to keep going anyway. Outside, the night was dark, the valley invisible, the future uncertain. Inside, Cece found herself moving closer to Nathaniel. Not thinking, just moving, until they were standing near enough to touch. I'm still angry, she said, I know. But I'm also grateful that you agreed to this insanity, that you gave me a way out. We gave each other a way out. Did we, though, or did we just find a different way in? Nathaniel reached out, took her hand, the same way he had in Millbrook Square. Rough hands, warm hands, steady. I guess we'll find out, he said. They stood like that until the fire burned low, until tomorrow became inevitable, until running was no longer an option, and somewhere in the darkness, wheels were already turning. Plans being made, a mother who had watched her daughter leave with satisfaction, a cousin who had waited 5 years for his chance at a title, forces converging on Ashland Valley Estate. But Cece knew now, knew about Victoria's conspiracy, knew about Marcus, knew this was all orchestrated. She just needed to figure out the end game, needed to understand what her mother truly wanted, and then she would turn it all upside down. They had 10 days. They left at dawn, 3 riders disappearing into morning mist. Nathaniel on his horse finally groomed properly. Daniel on a bay gelding that cost more than most men earned in a year. And Cece on a mare Daniel had brought from the estate, gentle but well-bred. The cottage door stood open behind them. Empty now, a shell they'd inhabited for a week. Cece didn't look back. Looking back was dangerous. Looking back made you remember what you were losing, made you forget what you were fighting for. They rode in silence, hours passing under horses' hooves. The landscape changing as they descended from the mountains, pine forests giving way to farmland, small villages growing into towns, the evidence of civilization thickening around them like smoke. Nathaniel rode differently now, straighter, the military slouch gone, his shoulders back, his jaw set. With each mile, Cece watched him transform, watched the drifter disappear and the Baron emerge. Like watching a snake shed skin, inevitable, painful. He caught her watching once. "What? You're changing," she said. "Even the way you sit the horse is different." "Old habits," he said, but his voice was tight. He knew what was happening, knew he was putting the mask back on, the one he'd spent 5 years trying to remove. By the time they stopped for the night at a coaching inn, Nathaniel Blackwood looked nothing like Nathaniel Mackenzie. He moved with authority, spoke with command. When the innkeeper asked his business, he said simply, "Baron Blackwood. The Northeast Suite if you have it." The innkeeper fell over himself to accommodate. Cece watched it all from a distance. This was who he really was, or who he'd been trained to be. She wasn't sure there was a difference. That night in separate rooms, because propriety demanded it now, Cece lay awake thinking about transformation, about how quickly a person could change, how easily the roles we play become the people we are. And she thought about Victoria, about the conspiracy, about what was waiting for them at Ashland Valley. She needed to tell Nathaniel, needed to warn him about her mother's involvement, about the trap, but not yet, not until she saw the full picture, not until she understood what Victoria truly wanted. Soon, though, very soon. Ashland Valley Estate appeared on the third day like a mountain rising from plains. The main house was Georgian, 3 stories of limestone and glass, wings extending on either side, formal gardens despite it being winter, a circular drive, fountains frozen mid-spray, the kind of architecture designed to intimidate, to remind visitors that wealth and power lived here. Cece felt her breath catch. This was what Nathaniel had run from, this monument to money, this prison built from privilege. "Impressive, isn't it?" Daniel said. He'd noticed her staring. "Terrifying," she said honestly. "Wait until you see the inside." They rode through iron gates, past the gatehouse where a guard snapped to attention when he recognized Daniel. The drive curved through bare trees, gravel crunching under hooves. Then the house filled their vision. Overwhelming, inescapable. Staff lined up outside, 20 people at least, waiting. Cece looked at Nathaniel, saw his jaw clench, saw him take a breath, steel himself. "Ready?" he asked her. "No." "Good, me neither." They dismounted. A stable boy took the horses. The staff stood at attention, silent, watching. An older woman stepped forward. 60 perhaps, silver hair, severe black dress, eyes that missed nothing. "Master Nathaniel," she said. Her voice was cultured and controlled, but something moved underneath. Relief, anger, both. "Mrs. Fletcher," Nathaniel said. "It's been a long time." "5 years, sir. 5 years without a word. I apologize." "Apologies won't mend what's been broken." Then her eyes moved to Cece, assessed, calculated. "And this is my wife, Cecilia Blackwood." A murmur rippled through the staff, shock, confusion. No one had known. No one had been told. Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only sign of surprise she allowed. "I see, and when did this blessed event occur?" "Last week," Nathaniel said, "in Millbrook." "How sudden!" The word hung in the air, pregnant with judgment. Cece felt it like a slap. "Mrs. Fletcher," Nathaniel said, and his voice took on an edge Cece hadn't heard before. Authority, command. "My wife is to be shown every courtesy. She is the Baroness of Ashland Valley. She will be treated as such. Is that understood?" Mrs. Fletcher's face remained neutral, but something shifted. Recognition of the line drawn. "Of course, sir. Welcome to Ashland Valley, Lady Blackwood." Lady Blackwood. The title felt like a costume 2 sizes too large. Mrs. Fletcher led them inside, through doors that were 12 feet tall, into a foyer with marble floors and a staircase that swept upward like something from a dream, or a nightmare. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Blackwoods staring down with dead eyes. Judging, always judging. "The master suite has been prepared," Mrs. Fletcher said. "I took the liberty when Daniel sent word you were coming." "Thank you." They climbed the stairs, walked down a corridor lined with more portraits, more evidence of lineage and legacy, and wait, Mrs. Fletcher opened double doors. The master suite was larger than the entire cottage. A sitting room, a bedroom beyond, a dressing room, a private bath, furniture that cost more than Cece's father had earned in his best year. "I'll have the staff bring hot water," Mrs. Fletcher said. "Dinner is at 8. The family is eager to see you." She left, closed the doors behind her. Nathaniel stood in the center of the room, looking at everything and nothing, his face carefully blank. "This was my father's room," he said. "He died in that bed. Heart attack. Quick. The doctor said he didn't suffer. I'm not sure I believe that." Cece moved to him, put a hand on his arm. "We don't have to stay here. There must be other rooms. This is the master suite, the Baron's rooms. If I'm going to do this, I have to do it properly. Half measures won't work. Nate, I need a moment, please." Cece understood dismissal when she heard it. She went into the sitting room, left him alone with his ghosts. Through the window she could see the grounds, acres of them, gardens and groves and buildings in the distance, greenhouses, stables larger than most houses, the physical manifestation of wealth so enormous it didn't seem real. And somewhere in all this, an enemy was waiting. Marcus Blackwood, the cousin who wanted the title, who had spent 3 years building a case to take it, the cousin her mother had conspired with. 10 days, Cece thought. 10 days to figure this out, to understand the full trap, to turn it against Victoria. She heard voices outside, doors opening, footsteps, then shouting. "Where is he? Where is that selfish, cowardly—" A woman, young, furious. Cece opened the door, looked into the hallway. A girl stood there, 20 maybe, dark hair, Nathaniel's eyes, his jaw, wearing riding clothes and rage-like armor. "Who are you?" the girl demanded. "Cecilia Blackwood, Nathaniel's wife." The girl stared, then laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course he got married. 5 years of silence, and he shows up married. That's perfect. That's so perfectly him." "You must be Eleanor. And you must be desperate or stupid. Probably both. Do you have any idea what you've walked into?" "I'm beginning to." Eleanor pushed past her, stormed into the suite, found Nathaniel standing by the window. "You bastard," she said. "You absolute bastard." Nathaniel turned, looked at his sister. Some emotion flickered across his face. Guilt, grief, love buried under layers of distance. "Ellie, don't you dare Ellie me. 5 years, Nathaniel, 5 years I've been holding this place together. Writing letters you never answered, begging you to come home, and you were hiding in a cottage playing peasant while I fought Marcus alone. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't undo years of me telling workers you'd come back, telling investors you were just indisposed, telling the lawyers that you hadn't actually abandoned your responsibilities, you were just, what? Finding yourself. Ellie, I couldn't. You could have, you chose not to. There's a difference." Eleanor's voice cracked, and beneath the fury, Cece heard something else. Pain, abandonment, a younger sister who had been left alone to carry a burden too heavy for one person. "You're right," Nathaniel said quietly. "I chose poorly. I hurt you. I'm sorry." Eleanor wiped her eyes, angry at the tears at showing weakness. "Is she really your wife, or is this another one of your schemes?" "She's really my wife." Eleanor looked at Cece, really looked, saw something that made her pause. "Does she know about Marcus, about what we're facing?" "She knows enough." "Then she knows we're probably going to lose." Cece stepped forward. "No," she said, "we're not." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Confident. Practical. "Your brother might have run from responsibility, but I never learned how. My father taught me business. My mother taught me survival. Between the three of us, we can beat one lawyer with delusions of nobility." Something shifted in Eleanor's expression. Reassessment. The beginning of respect. "She's got spine," Eleanor said to Nathaniel. "I'll give you that." "I told you so," Daniel's voice came from the doorway. "She's the real thing." "Fine," Eleanor crossed her arms. "Then let's see if she can help us not lose everything our father built. We have 10 days. Marcus has 3 years of preparation. The odds are not in our favor." "Then we change the odds," Cece said. "How?" "By finding something Marcus doesn't know about, something that invalidates his case entirely. And by exposing Victoria's conspiracy," Cece thought, "by showing everyone this whole thing was orchestrated." Eleanor looked at Daniel, then at Nathaniel, then back at Cece. "I'm listening," she said. They worked through the night, the 4 of them in the estate library, a room that held 3 centuries of Blackwood family documents. Ledgers, in deeds, in charters, in contracts. The accumulated paper trail of wealth. Cece had never felt more at home. This was what her father had taught her. How to read between lines, how to find the story numbers told, how to trace connections others missed. Walk me through it, she said, from the beginning. Why does Marcus think he can win? Eleanor pulled out a stack of papers. The law is clear. A baron can be removed from title if he's proven unfit. Abandonment of duties is grounds. Nathaniel hasn't been seen at the estate in 5 years. Hasn't signed a single document. Hasn't attended a single board meeting. Hasn't fulfilled any of his responsibilities. But the estate is still functioning. Because I've been forging his signature, Eleanor said flatly. On everything, documents, contracts, decision. If that comes out in court, it proves his abandonment and my fraud. We both lose. Cece nodded. What else? Marcus has testimony from workers who feel abandoned, investors who want stability, legal precedent from similar cases, and a lawyer named Marcus Pemberton who's been building this case for 3 years. Something cold settled in Cece's stomach. Pemberton? Marcus Pemberton. Yes, why? Cece's mind raced. Pemberton. Arthur Pemberton had been her mother's choice, the man Victoria wanted her to marry, and now his son was representing Marcus Blackwood. The pieces clicked together, the full picture emerging. Because Arthur Pemberton was the man my mother wanted me to marry, Cece said slowly. Marcus Pemberton is his son. The room went silent. Your mother knows Marcus, Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. Apparently. Daniel swore. Nathaniel looked at Cece with dawning horror. This isn't coincidence, Eleanor said. Your mother orchestrated this, sent you to find Nathaniel, knew you'd marry him, knew it would create evidence of instability. Cece took a breath, time to show her hand. She did more than that, she said. I overheard her. 3 nights before I left Boston. She was talking to someone she called Mr. Chen about how she'd hired an investigator to find Nathaniel, about how she'd manipulated me into going to Millbrook, about how the marriage would be used against Nathaniel in court. 3 faces stared at her. You knew. Nathaniel's voice was quiet, dangerous. You knew this was a trap. Yes. And you married me anyway. Yes. Why? Cece met his eyes. Because I wanted to understand the full picture, because I knew running wouldn't solve anything, and because I thought if I was inside the trap, I could spring it, could turn it against her. Silence, heavy, tense. Then Eleanor laughed. Actually laughed. I like her even more now. She's devious. She lied, Nathaniel said. So did you, Eleanor pointed out. For a week, about being a baron. You're even. Nathaniel looked at Cece, some complex emotion moving across his face. Anger, respect, confusion. Why tell us now? Because we need all the information to win. Because keeping secrets only helps Victoria. And because, Cece paused. Because I'm tired of lying. To you, to myself. I want to fight this together. Really together. No more secrets. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. No more secrets, he agreed. So what do we do? Daniel asked. If Victoria and Marcus Pemberton are conspiring, if they've been planning this for years, how do we beat them? We expose the conspiracy, Cece said. We prove Victoria manipulated everything. We show the court this wasn't Nathaniel's choice, but Victoria's scheme. Can we prove it? Eleanor asked. Maybe. I heard her talking, but I have no physical evidence. Then we find some, Eleanor said. Letters, communications, money trails, something that connects Victoria to Marcus, to Pemberton, to the conspiracy. And we find the charter clause, Cece said. There has to be something in the original Ashland Valley Charter. Some technicality, some requirement that invalidates Marcus's case. They searched, hours of digging through archives, dust and old paper, and the smell of history. Finally, Eleanor found it. A document in a locked case. Parchment so old it was brown at the edges. Ink faded, but still legible. The Charter of Ashland Valley Estate, granted to Marcus Blackwood I. Original terms and conditions for the barony. Cece read it by candlelight, once, twice, then a third time to be sure. Here, she said, pointed to a clause near the bottom. Eleanor read over her shoulder. The Baron of Ashland Valley may be removed from title only upon proven failure of estate management or moral unfitness as demonstrated by financial ruin or criminal action. Financial ruin, Cece said, not abandonment, not physical absence. Financial ruin. The estate has to be failing financially before removal can be considered. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. The estate isn't failing, it's thriving. Even with Nathaniel gone, we've been profitable every year. Then Marcus's case falls apart. The legal precedent he's using doesn't apply. The charter takes priority over common law. Daniel leaned forward. Are you sure, reasonably? We'd need to verify with lawyers, but this is a contractual document. Original terms. It supersedes later interpretations. Nathaniel was smiling, actually smiling. You found it. You found the loophole. I found a defense, Cece corrected. But we still need to prove the estate is thriving, which means we need the real books, not Eleanor's forgeries. Those are locked in the estate office, Eleanor said. Daniel has access. Get them, and we need testimony from workers, investors, anyone who can speak to the estate's success. They worked through the night, building a case, gathering evidence. By dawn, they had a strategy. It might not work, might not be enough, but it was a chance, the first real chance they'd had. Cece stood by the library window watching sunrise paint the grounds gold. Behind her, the others were still working, still planning, still fighting. She'd been married for 2 weeks, married to a man she barely knew, fighting a battle that had been orchestrated by her mother, in a world she'd tried to escape, and she'd never felt more alive, because for the first time she wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't letting Victoria control her. She was fighting back, and she was going to win. The courthouse was packed, every seat filled, standing room only. All of Ashland Valley had come to watch. Workers, investors, society matrons, gossips and gawkers, and people who smelled blood in the water. Cece sat in the front row, Eleanor beside her, Daniel behind them, all three dressed formally, perfectly, playing the part of stable, respectable family. Nathaniel sat at the defendant's table with Mr. Harrigan, the lawyer they'd hired, an old man with sharp eyes and sharper mind, retired judge who believed in the law more than politics. Across the aisle sat Marcus Blackwood, 45, handsome in a cold way, wearing confidence like expensive cologne. His lawyer beside him, Marcus Pemberton, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. And next to Pemberton, a woman Cece recognized with a jolt of shock that still managed to cut despite expecting it. Victoria Hartwell, her mother, sitting in Marcus's section, allied, complicit. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Victoria smiled, small, satisfied. Cece felt rage building in her chest, hot and sharp and dangerous, but she kept her face neutral. Let none of it show. That was the game. Control, appearance. Never let them see you bleed. The judge entered. Morrison, 60, hard face, fair reputation. He'd heard arguments from both sides already. Today was testimony, evidence, the final battle. Marcus's lawyer stood, Marcus Pemberton, Arthur's son, part of the conspiracy. He presented the case Cece had heard outlined: abandonment, neglect, unfitness, 5 years of absence, 5 years of shirked responsibility. Witnesses testified, workers who felt abandoned, investors who wanted stability. It was damning, effective, built on truth and twisted just enough to destroy. Then Mr. Harrigan stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood. Eleanor took the stand, swore to tell truth, sat straight and proud. Miss Blackwood, Harrigan said, what is the current financial state of Ashland Valley Estate? Thriving, Eleanor said. We've been profitable every year for the past 5. Revenue is up 18%. Worker wages have increased. Investments have paid dividends. The estate is stronger now than when my father died. And who has been managing these successes? I have. With Daniel Sullivan's help, we've maintained operations, made improvements, grown the business. And so despite Baron Blackwood's physical absence, the estate has not failed. Correct, Marcus Pemberton objected, argued that success despite absence proved the Baron was unnecessary, that Eleanor could continue managing, that the title should pass to someone present. But Harrigan was ready. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence the original charter of Ashland Valley Estate, specifically Clause 17, which states that removal of a baron requires proven financial failure or criminal action, neither of which has occurred. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's face went white. Marcus Pemberton scrambled for response. Judge Morrison called for order. Read the charter himself. Considered. The charter is clear, he said. Financial ruin is required for removal on grounds of mismanagement. The defense has proven the estate is solvent, profitable even. Therefore, that ground for removal fails. Marcus Pemberton stood. Your Honor, we also argue moral unfitness. Baron Blackwood married a woman of questionable character. A hasty secret marriage to Cecilia Hartwell, daughter of a bankrupt family herself running from scandal. This suggests instability, poor judgment, unfitness to manage the Blackwood legacy. Now it was Cece's turn. The defense calls Lady Cecilia Blackwood. Cece stood, walked to the witness stand, felt every eye in the courtroom on her, felt her mother's gaze burning into her back. She swore the oath, sat, met Harrigan's eyes. Lady Blackwood, he said, please tell the court about your marriage to Baron Blackwood. Cece took a breath. This was it, the moment where truth became weapon. I married Nathaniel thinking he was poor, she said. Clear, loud, letting everyone hear. I was running from my mother's attempt to sell me into marriage with Arthur Pemberton, a man 3 times my age who had already buried 2 wives. I needed an escape. I thought I was marrying a veteran with nothing. A man unsuitable enough that my mother would disown me. Give me freedom. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victoria's face went rigid. When did you learn your husband's true identity? Harrigan asked. 8 days after we married, when his estate manager found us. And what was your reaction? Shock, anger, betrayal. Cece looked at Nathaniel, and then understanding, because I realized we were the same. Both running from expectations, both trying to choose our own lives, both trapped by families who saw us as property, not people. Why are you here today? Because I choose my husband, not for his title, not for his money, but for who he is, for his integrity, for his courage to walk away from a life that was killing him, and for his courage to come back and fight for what matters. Cece turned to face the courtroom, face her mother. But there's more you should know, she said. This entire case is a conspiracy. My mother, Victoria Hartwell, has been manipulating events for months. She hired investigators to find Nathaniel. She orchestrated my escape to Millbrook. She knew I would marry him, and she planned to use that marriage as evidence of his unfitness. She pulled papers from her pocket, letters, documents, evidence they'd found digging through estate correspondence, communications between Victoria and Marcus Pemberton, between Marcus Pemberton and Marcus Blackwood. Here are letters between Victoria Hartwell and Marcus Pemberton discussing strategy, discussing payments contingent on Marcus Blackwood winning the title, discussing how my marriage to Nathaniel would be portrayed as evidence of his unfitness. Marcus Pemberton, who happens to be the son of Arthur Pemberton, the man my mother tried to sell me to. This whole case is built on conspiracy, on manipulation, on using me as a weapon against my own husband. She handed the evidence to the bailiff, to the judge. Morrison read them, his face darkened. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, stand. Victoria stood, pale, shaking, but still trying to maintain dignity. These letters suggest you have been conspiring with the plaintiff to manipulate these proceedings, to use your daughter as a pawn in a scheme to strip Baron Blackwood of his title. Do you deny this? Victoria's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Marcus Pemberton, at Marcus Blackwood, at the trap closing around her. I was protecting my daughter's interests. By selling her to a man she didn't want, by orchestrating her marriage to another man to serve your own schemes, that's not protection. Mrs. Hartwell, that's manipulation. Your Honor, you will sit down and be silent, or I will have you removed from my courtroom. Victoria sat, defeated, exposed. Marcus Pemberton was on his feet, objecting, arguing. But the damage was done. Harrigan called more witnesses, tenants who spoke of Nathaniel's reforms before he left, of better housing, fair wages, a man who cared about people, not just profit. Workers who wanted him back, who had prospered under Eleanor's management but trusted the Blackwood name. Father Donnelly testified, spoke of the marriage ceremony, of 2 people who had chosen each other honestly, of vows that were real regardless of circumstances. Rose O'Malley testified, spoke of Cece's character, of her courage, of a woman who knew her own mind. The evidence mounted, testimony, documents, the charter's clear language, the estate's financial success, the conspiracy revealed. By the time closing arguments came, the outcome felt inevitable. Judge Morrison took less than an hour to deliberate. I find in favor of the defendant, he said, Baron Nathaniel Blackwood has not failed in his duties sufficient to warrant removal of title. The estate is prosperous. No financial ruin exists. The marriage, while unconventional, is legal and valid. Furthermore, evidence of conspiracy to manipulate these proceedings is deeply concerning. Marcus Blackwood's challenge is denied. Nathaniel Blackwood remains Baron of Ashland Valley. Additionally, I am referring the matter of conspiracy and fraud to the district attorney. Mrs. Victoria Hartwell and Mr. Marcus Pemberton will answer questions regarding their conduct. The gavel fell. Final. Irrevocable. Nathaniel closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. Eleanor grabbed Cece's hand, squeezed hard enough to hurt. "You did it?" she whispered. "You actually did it." Daniel was grinning. "Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant." But Cece was watching her mother, watching Victoria Hartwell stand, turn, walk toward the exit with her spine straight and her head high, playing dignity even in defeat. Cece followed. She caught her mother on the courthouse steps. Afternoon sun harsh and unforgiving. "Mother?" Victoria turned. Her face was composed, perfectly controlled, but Cece could see the cracks underneath, the rage barely contained. "Cecilia, I suppose you think you've won. I think I've survived. There's a difference. You've married a man you barely know, chained yourself to a title and responsibility. You've become exactly what you were trying to escape." "No," Cece said. "I've chosen my own chain. That's the difference. You would have sold me to Arthur Pemberton, made me an object. I chose Nathaniel, chose to fight beside him, chose partnership over property." Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Partnership? How naive. Give it a year, give it 10. You'll realize what I already know. Marriage is business. Love is a luxury poor people use to console themselves." "Then I pity you." "Save your pity. I don't need it. I raised you, educated you, prepared you for the world. And this is how you repay me, by destroying my plans, by humiliating me in public. You did that yourself. You conspired with Marcus Pemberton, used me as a pawn, tried to destroy a good man because you saw opportunity for profit. That's not motherhood. That's not even business. That's just cruelty." Victoria's control finally cracked. "Everything I did was for you, for our family, to save us from poverty." "No," Cece said quietly. "You did it for yourself, to maintain control, to prove you could still manipulate the world to your specifications. You never saw me as your daughter, only as an investment, a tool. And what are you to him, to this baron you claim to have chosen? You're a convenient wife, a woman who appeared when he needed legitimacy. Don't mistake that for love." The words hit harder than Cece expected, touched doubts she hadn't spoken, fears she'd been carrying. But then she thought about Nathaniel in the cottage, teaching her to cook, sharing his nightmares, playing violin in the dark, opening pieces of himself he'd kept hidden for years. She thought about him standing in court, defending her when Marcus's lawyer attacked her character, calling her his partner, his equal, meaning it. "Maybe you're right," Cece said. "Maybe we started as convenience, but we became something else, something real. And that terrifies you, because you've never had it. You married for status, lived for control, and died inside piece by piece until all that was left was this need to dominate, to prove your worth by diminishing others." Victoria's face was white. "I won't forget this. I won't forgive it." "Good," Cece said, "because I don't want your forgiveness. I want you to leave me alone, to accept that I'm not yours anymore, that I never was. I'm my own person." Finally, she turned to walk away. "Cecilia." She stopped, didn't turn around. "You'll regret this," Victoria said. "When the novelty wears off, when you realize what you've given up, you'll regret it." "Maybe," Cece said, "but it'll be my regret, my choice, my life." She walked back into the courthouse, left her mother standing alone on the steps, walked away from 23 years of manipulation and control and expectations that had nearly crushed her, walked toward Nathaniel, who was waiting in the hallway, who saw her face and knew. "Are you all right?" he asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I will be." He held out his hand, she took it, and felt for the first time in her life truly free. That night back at Ashland Valley Estate, they held a small celebration. Just family. Eleanor, Daniel, Mr. Harrigan, who accepted one glass of champagne and then excused himself. The staff, who seemed genuinely happy their baron had returned. Cece stood on the terrace outside the master suite, looking at ground she was supposed to call home now, trying to process everything that had happened, everything that had changed. Nathaniel found her there. "You should be celebrating," he said. "You won. We won. You did the work. You have found the charter clause. You exposed Victoria's conspiracy. You testified. This victory is yours. Cece shook her head. It's ours. We did it together. He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at darkness, at the estate spreading beneath them like a kingdom they hadn't asked for, but now had to rule. I need to tell you something, Cece said. Her heart was pounding. She'd been putting this off for days, hadn't been sure, hadn't wanted to believe it, but now there was no denying it. What is it? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the cold air. Cece didn't look at him, couldn't bear to see his reaction. You're certain, as certain as I can be without a doctor. The timing is right. The signs are there. It must have happened during our first week, in the cottage. Silence, long enough that Cece's stomach started to twist. Then Nathaniel laughed, soft, genuine. Of course, he said. Of course you are, because nothing about this situation could be simple. Cece finally looked at him, saw not horror but wonder, maybe even joy. You're not angry. Angry, Cece, we're married. We're building a life together. A child is a gift. Unexpected, yes. Complicated, certainly, but not unwanted. I didn't plan this. Neither of us planned any of this, but here we are anyway. He pulled her close, arms around her, warm despite the cold. We'll figure it out, he said, the same way we figured out everything else, together. Cece let herself lean into him, let herself feel the relief and fear and strange tentative hope. They stood like that until Eleanor found them, demanded to know what they were doing hiding when there was champagne to drink and victory to celebrate. We have news, Nathaniel said. Eleanor looked between them, read something in their faces. Oh, she said, then smiled, wide and genuine. Oh, really, really, Cece said. Eleanor hugged her, hard enough to hurt, then stepped back, composed herself. Well then, she said, I suppose we'd better make sure this estate stays in the family. Come inside, both of you. Let's toast to new beginnings. They went inside, into warmth and light and family. Into a future Cece couldn't have imagined 3 weeks ago, when she'd been a desperate girl running from her mother, when she'd proposed to a stranger in a frozen square, when she'd thought she was choosing poverty and getting freedom. She'd gotten neither, and both, and something else entirely. A partnership, a family, a life being built from the wreckage of two people's attempts to escape. And standing in the drawing room with Eleanor pouring champagne and Daniel making toasts and Nathaniel's hand warm in hers, Cece thought maybe this was what freedom actually looked like, not the absence of chains, but the choice of which ones to wear and who to wear them with. But the night wasn't over yet. There was one more piece, one more secret that needed revealing. The next morning, a letter arrived, delivered by a lawyer from Boston, addressed to Cecilia Blackwood. Cece opened it at breakfast, Nathaniel and Eleanor watching. The handwriting was familiar, shaky but determined. Her father's hand. She read, My dearest Cece, if you're reading this, I am gone. And you are, I hope, free. I know your mother. I know what she will try to do. She will try to sell you as she tried to sell herself. She married me for money I didn't have, for status that was already crumbling. She has lived her entire life trying to control what she cannot have. But you, my brilliant girl, you have something she never had. My mind, my stubbornness, my refusal to be what others demand. I have left you what little I could. Not money that's long gone, but knowledge. The business principles I taught you. The ability to read numbers and see truth. The courage to choose your own path. I suspect you will run. I suspect you will find someone unsuitable. I suspect you will choose partnership over property, freedom over security. Good. Whatever you choose, whoever you choose, make sure it's your choice. Not hers, not mine, not society's. Yours. Find your partner, Cece. Not your prison. Find someone who sees you, who values your mind as much as your face, who wants an ally, not a decoration. And when you find him, and I believe you will fight for it, fight for each other, fight for the life you want to build. Don't let them cage you, my darling girl. You were born to fly. I am so proud of you. I always was. I always will be. Your loving father, Thomas Hartwell. P.S. There's a small account. Nothing Victoria knows about. Enough for a fresh start if you need it. The details are with my lawyer, Mr. Chen. Not the Chen your mother hired, my Chen. The one I trusted. He'll find you when the time is right. Cece's hands shook, tears streaming down her face. Her father had known. Had prepared for this. Had left her one final gift. Not money, though apparently there was some, but permission, blessing, pride. Nathaniel read over her shoulder. His hand found hers, squeezed. He would have loved you, Cece said. He would have seen what you are. what we are. I wish I could have met him. So do I. Eleanor was crying too. That's beautiful. He really understood you. He did. Cece folded the letter, carefully, a treasure to keep, a reminder that she came from love, that someone had seen her, had believed in her, had wanted her free. What was the account? Nathaniel asked. Did he say how much? Cece checked the second page. Her eyes widened. Enough to rebuild Hartwell Manor 3 times over. He'd been hiding it from Victoria for years, slowly building it in case I needed it. And now, Cece looked at Nathaniel, at Eleanor, at the estate they would run together. Now we use it, for the workers, for improvements, for building something that lasts. Are you sure? Nathaniel asked. It's yours, your inheritance. We're married, Cece said. It's ours. And I want to use it for something that matters, something my father would be proud of. Nathaniel kissed her, soft, sweet, full of promise. Then we will, he said. Spring came to Ashland Valley like a benediction. Cece stood in the garden she'd planted herself, watching green shoots push through dark earth, daffodils and tulips, roses that would bloom in June, a vegetable patch that supplied the estate kitchen and the workers' families. She'd dug this garden with her own hands. While pregnant, while Eleanor worried and Nathaniel fretted and Mrs. Fletcher made disapproving sounds. But Cece had needed to create something, to put her hands in soil and grow things, to prove that life could bloom in places that had seemed dead. Behind her, the estate hummed with activity, not the silent, oppressive wealth of Nathaniel's childhood, but something alive, productive, human. They'd made changes, so many changes. Worker housing rebuilt, wages increased, a school for the children, a clinic with an actual doctor, profit sharing that made the workers partners in success. Blackwood Steelworks had doubled in value, not through exploitation, through innovation, through treating workers as people, through Cece's economics and Nathaniel's vision and Eleanor's relentless management. The estate was thriving, truly thriving, and Cece was happy, truly happy. A sound from the blanket spread under an oak tree, a gurgle, then a laugh. Cece turned, smiled. Rose Eleanor Blackwood, 6 months old, kicked her feet and waved her arms. Reaching for the sunlight filtering through leaves, she had her father's gray eyes, her mother's dark hair, and a personality that was entirely her own. Loud, demanding, fearless. Cece scooped her up, kissed her soft head, breathed in the smell of milk and soap and new life. What are you laughing at, little one? Rose laughed again, grabbed Cece's hair, pulled. Ow, yes, very funny. Footsteps on the path. Nathaniel appeared, still in riding clothes. He'd been inspecting the North Fields with Daniel. He looked different than the man she'd met in Millbrook Square, healthier, less haunted. The nightmares still came sometimes, but less often, less violently. And when they did, Cece was there, holding him, reminding him he was safe. There are my girls, he said. Cece's heart still did something complicated when he said that. My girls, like she'd been his all along. Like they'd been building toward this from the moment their hands touched in a frozen town square. How are the fields? Good. The new irrigation system is working. Daniel thinks we'll have the best crop in 10 years. Your father would be proud. Nathaniel's face softened. I think he would. We're doing it differently than he did, but better. Rose reached for her father. Nathaniel took her, held her with practiced ease. A hands-on father in a time when most barons hired nurses and never touched their children. But Nathaniel wasn't most barons, and Cece wasn't most baronesses. They were building something new, something theirs. Letter came from your mother, Nathaniel said carefully. Cece stiffened, and still in Newport, living modestly, the scandal mostly forgotten. She asks if she can meet Rose, says she wants to make amends. Cece had known this was coming, had been preparing for it. What do you think, she asked. I think she's your mother. I think Rose should know her grandmother. But I also think boundaries are important, that we protect our daughter first. Cece nodded. I'll write back. Tell her she can visit. Once. Briefly. On our terms. If she can be civil, we'll see about more. You're more generous than I would be. I'm not generous. I'm practical. Rose deserves to know where she comes from. All of it. The good and the bad. And Victoria she's broken. But she's family. Nathaniel kissed her. Rose between them. A family sandwich. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not in at least 3 hours. Unacceptable. I love you, your brilliant mind, your stubborn heart, your complete inability to do what anyone expects. I married a drifter to spite my mother. And I married a desperate aristocrat to hide from my title. Look how that turned out. They laughed. Rose laughed with them, not understanding but delighted by the sound. Eleanor appeared on the path, carrying a stack of papers, always working, always managing. Sorry to interrupt the domestic bliss, she said, but we have a problem. What kind of problem? Nathaniel asked. The good kind. 3 different investors want to partner with us. 2 railroads want to contract our steel, and Cambridge wants Cece to lecture on economics next term. Cece's eyebrows rose. Cambridge, really? Really? Apparently your papers on labor economics are causing quite a stir. They want the Baroness who actually implemented her theories. I can't. I have Rose. Bring her. Scandalize the academics. Show them a woman can be a mother and an economist and a Baroness all at once. Nathaniel grinned. Do it. I'll come with you. We'll make it a family trip. You want to come to academic lectures? I want to watch you destroy old men who think women can't do mathematics. It's my favorite entertainment. Cece laughed, considered. All right, yes, let's do it. Eleanor smiled. Good, I'll write to the provost. Tell him to prepare for a revolution. She left, back to work, back to managing the empire they'd built together. Cece and Nathaniel stood in the garden, Rose between them, the estate spreading around them like roots growing deep. Can you believe it? Cece asked. 18 months ago, I was running from my mother. You were hiding from your title. And now we're running towards something, Nathaniel finished, together. Are you happy? Deliriously, terrifyingly, completely. Me too. Rose reached for Cece's nose, grabbed it, squeezed. Ow, gentle little one. She gets that from you, Nathaniel said, the grabbing what she wants. And the stubbornness from you. Poor child, doomed from the start. They walked back toward the house, the 3 of them, family. Inside, Mrs. Fletcher had prepared lunch. The dining room was set, not formally, just plates and food and space for people who worked hard and ate together. Workers often joined them, breaking down the barriers Nathaniel's father had maintained, making the estate feel less like a kingdom and more like a community. That evening, after Rose was asleep in the nursery, Cece and Nathaniel sat on the terrace, watching stars appear over the valley. Do you ever think about the cottage? Cece asked. Miss it? Sometimes. The simplicity of it, the quiet. We could go back, visit. Is it still there? I asked Daniel to maintain it, for weekends, when we need to escape. Nathaniel pulled her close. You're brilliant. I have my moments. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that came from truly knowing someone, from having survived storms together, from having built something real. Nathaniel, what would you tell that soldier in Millbrook Square, the one who thought marriage to a desperate woman was a terrible idea? Nathaniel thought about it. I'd tell him to say yes faster, to stop being afraid, to trust that sometimes the craziest decisions lead to the best outcomes. And what would you tell me, that desperate girl asking strangers to marry her? I'd tell her she's braver than she knows, smarter than anyone gives her credit for, and that she's about to meet someone worth fighting for. Cece kissed him, deep, meaningful, full of 18 months of love and partnership and choosing each other every single day. I love you, she said, my drifter, Baron. I love you, he said, my rebellious economist. Inside, Rose cried, wanting attention, wanting food, wanting her parents. They went to her together, as they did everything, as they would continue to do, for all the years ahead. Because Cecilia Hartwell had married a drifter to ruin her mother's plans, and discovered he owned half of New England. But more importantly, she discovered he had a heart big enough to share, a mind sharp enough to match hers, a soul brave enough to choose freedom over expectation. They'd both been running, both trying to escape, and they'd found each other instead, found partnership, found love, found a life worth fighting for, on their own terms, always on their own terms.